right, well, we're going to go right into this segment, the last segment of the show, and I'll probably continue it on a future show. But one of the things, I attended a conference recently, and it was an endocrinology conference, and I learned some very interesting things, some things that I had been talking about in my practice for years, and this kind of solidified some of the ideas. And one of the things that I have found, that if you keep talking to someone about, let's suppose, their diabetes or their hypertension or their illnesses, sometimes they don't always hear what you say, but if you say it enough times, you may trigger something in them that they understand. A lot of people, when they're in the doctor's office, there's a lot going on and they're under a lot of pressure, and so you're telling them and you think they understand, but they don't understand, and they're afraid to tell you that they don't understand because they don't want to look stupid. And that's one of the things that even I sometimes suffer from in conferences and things of the nature. You don't want to ask a stupid question. Nobody likes to look like they don't know what they're talking about. But in this particular subject, one of the things that I've been talking about a lot is diet and insulin resistance. And insulin resistance tends to be a major, major problem, not only from prediabetes, but it also is related to obesity. And it's related to the obesity epidemic that we suffer from. And one of the things, remember, as we age and as we get older, our body tends to change. Obviously, if you look at pictures of yourself when you were younger, your face was thinner, you had more muscle. As you've gotten older, things tend to obviously sag, you tend to put on more weight. And why is that? What is that reason that our body changes over time? Well, part of it has to do with the fact that insulin, this hormone that actually drives diabetes, is what they call, it is an anabolic hormone. Now, I didn't even know that, and I was told that, and what people talk about is, anabolic steroids. Well, what are anabolic steroids? Well, we all know bodybuilders will do anabolic steroids to actually build their body habitus, meaning they'll use them, but they're illegal. And so what they have found now is that insulin is just as effective as anabolic steroids. In fact, insulin trumps just about every hormone in the body. Insulin will make anything. It not only makes muscle, it will make fat. So with that theory in place, if you're insulin resistant, so tell me what happens after you eat. Well, after you eat, you secrete a lot of insulin because your body's already making insulin. And what is that insulin doing if you're not working out? What are you doing if you eat and you sit? Well, you're telling insulin to make fat. And that's why we see this overabundancy. So one of the things that came out of that was the fact that I don't know if the slides are there's some slides on insulin resistance that are there. Let's see, yeah. So this is, again, insulin resistant is prediabetes. If we check your insulin level, we should see a normal value of 2 to 8, and obviously the lower is better. And we talked about insulin being an anabolic hormone, and it will build anything. So let's go on to the next slide. This is a pattern of what I was trying to talk about, and I know it's probably maybe hard for you to see. I stole this slide from this, but what it basically talks about is different eating patterns, and you can see that the people that eat steady meals, they get lower levels of both fat and cholesterol, and triglycerides levels are lower in people that basically eat what I call more of a steady diet. And when you binge or you eat a lot, then you get these wild secretions. So we can go to the next slide, and I think it explains it a little bit better, and what happens when you eat rapid sugars, and you see this huge insulin spike on the bottom one in that box, and then you start to see cholesterol starting to rise and the sugar starting to rise. So what happens is when you eat 3 meals a day, or you eat these, these big meals, and a lot of people will tell you, well, I don't eat all day, and then I go home and I eat. Well, what do you do when you do that? And this is the basis behind the nibbling diet, which is eating smaller meals all day long, keeps these insulin spikes from actually happening. And these insulin spikes are what raises our blood pressure. They raise, and it's been linked to a lot of issues. I mean, especially cancers, and I have a slide that we'll show you in a minute. But basically, based on your BMI, your insulin. Based on your BMI, there's a relative risk for all forms of cancer. The theory is that when you eat and you have high insulin levels, you basically are increasing free radical formation because food creates free radicals, and those free radicals are basically linked to destruction of DNA and destruction of certain tissues, which is causing cancer. So it just makes sense for us to have these very small increments of diet, and when you eat these big meals, I mean, listen, I do it too. I sit down, I have dinner, and then I go, I'll eat dinner and then I'll sit. And what am I telling my body to do? Build fat. And is there any reason? You look around and we're all huge today, and because of that, except for a few people who have maybe eat correctly. So there's a difference between glycemic index and glycemic load, and what I mean by that is that glycemic index is basically the potential of the food, and the glycemic load is actually what comes out of it. So this low amylose diet, or vegetables below the ground, are just one of those ways to basically offset that. So let's see if we have any more yeah. Now this I think this was very interesting. Essential nutrients. So one of the things that became apparent to me in that is there is no essential carbohydrate. So what that means is essential items are things that you can't make, but items that your body has to ingest. And there are essential fatty acids, and we'll go over that in a minute, and there are essential amino acids, meaning you actually have to have these on a daily basis. If you do not, certain diseases will take place. And but carbohydrates can actually be made from your muscle tissue and your fat stores. So basically, in a diet of nutrients should basically be core of the amount of amino acids and the amount of free fatty acids you need on a daily basis. And if we go to another slide there, that basically, I want to talk about fatty acids. This is a good slide which talks about the fact that why we have essential fatty acids. If you look at that fatty acid on the top, mammals lack the ability to put that double bond in between the 3 and the 6, and our body can synthesize, once we eat those, the omega-3 fatty acids and the omega-6 fatty acids, we make other products from that, and arachidonic acid is one of those products that we have to make. It causes prostaglandins, which are important in protecting our stomach and our kidneys. There's some bad prostaglandins that mediate pain. Leukotrienes are very important in our immune system, and sometimes in our allergies also. And the anandamides play a role in cell signaling. So let's go on to the next one. I'll try and cram all these in. These are the essential amino acids, phenylalanine, and as you know, there are certain inborn errors in metabolism where these are a problem, and you have to eliminate them from the diet. But that being said, for the most part, we cannot make these amino acids. We have to ingest them on a daily basis. If we don't make proteins, and we don't synthesize the right amount of stuff in our body. Okay, let's go to, that's just basically for your information. And I put this slide together because this is the daily requirements of what we should be eating, which is protein at 56 grams for a male, 46 grams for female. Here you get into the omega fatty acids, which is 17 grams, 1.6 for the omega-3 fatty acids. Most of what we need is omega-6 and a fiber and carbohydrates, 130 grams for both male and females. Now, there were also some stuff on cholesterol, which they said 300 milligrams, but I think much less a day. Our body really has to have some cholesterol. It doesn't really absorb it. It manufactures all of it, but the trans fats are very low. There are other things, and I may talk about that more. Let's go to the next slide, which is, this is what we call the protein versus calorie leverage slide. And this is a very interesting fact. What I told you before was the amount of protein we should have a day, 56 versus 46 grams, call it 50 grams on the average, free fatty acids. So if we, this is what happens to us a lot. If we do not eat these essential nutrients, let's suppose we pack those in a tight ball, and on the outside of it, we put 300 grams of carbohydrates. Our body will eat all of those carbohydrates looking for that 45 grams of protein to make those essential essential amino acids, and it will look for the free fatty acids that we need, the omega-3s. So if you eat protein and if you eat the things that you need, your body becomes less hungry. If you do not, if you eat cereal in the morning, the Cheerios and the oatmeal, I mean, I swear to God, that's the biggest conspiracy of all, telling us that oatmeal and all this other stuff is good for us. I mean, let me tell you, it's the worst thing you can eat. I've always said that. I don't have a box of cereal in my house anymore because it's just a sugar craving. And like I said, there are no essential carbohydrates. There are no carbohydrates that you have to have. It's good that you have some, but there are none that you have to have, and your body will keep searching for those carbohydrates, for those amino acids and free fatty acids all day long, and it will eat whatever it can to try and get that. And the food out there is excuse my French, but that's what it is. Processed food is a bunch of whipped up carbohydrates, and therein lies the conspiracy and why we have so much obesity, because all of the essential stuff has been taken out. All of the good stuff is missing from our diet, and you have to actually look for these things. Now, I have a slide on obesity, and it shows that basically in the 1970s is when we started to see the obesity epidemic, and nobody really knows exactly why that really took place, but I believe it has to do with GMOs, genetically modified organism, and it has to do with an increase in our sedentary lifestyle and the computers and a lot of the games and a lot of the things that keep us sitting. So this is why I say get up and walk after you eat, work out after you eat, strain your muscles, do something, because you have insulin circulating in your system, and you can actually build muscle. You can actually stem the tide of building fat. Well, I know there's a lot of information for one night. I will continue it on one later show, and unfortunately, it's a teaser. We're going to have to come back and do that again, and that's all I have for tonight. Thank you for tuning in.